I caught my neighbor on my security camera doing something in my yard every night for 6 months that explained everything. I moved into my house about 8 months ago. It's a small place in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but it has a decent backyard that I was excited about. The previous owners had apparently been avid gardeners because there were flower beds everywhere, a vegetable patch, and this beautiful rose garden along the back fence. Here's the thing though, I'm not a gardener. I work long hours as an ER nurse, pulling 12-hour shifts, and I barely have time to mow the lawn, let alone maintain flower beds. I figured everything would just die off and I'd eventually replace it all with low-maintenance stuff, or maybe just grass. Except nothing died. The roses kept blooming. The vegetable garden kept producing tomatoes and zucchini. The flower beds stayed vibrant and weed-free. I noticed it, but honestly just thought maybe the previous owners had planted really hardy stuff. I was too exhausted most days to think much about it. My neighbor on the left side is this older guy named Frank. He's probably in his 70s, lives alone, keeps to himself mostly. We'd wave at each other, but never really talked beyond basic hellos. He seemed nice enough, but quiet. About 3 weeks ago, I finally got around to installing security cameras. Nothing major, just some basic ones from Amazon that connect to my phone. I put one facing the front door, one on the back door, and one that had a wide view of the backyard. Mostly I wanted them because there'd been some car break-ins in the neighborhood. Last Tuesday, I was scrolling through the footage during a slow moment at work, just checking to make sure everything was recording properly. I noticed the backyard camera had picked up motion around 11 p.m. the night before. I clicked on it, expecting to see a raccoon or a cat. It was Frank. My neighbor Frank was in my backyard at 11 at night. I immediately panicked, pulled up more footage, started going back through the recordings. Frank was there every single night, always around the same time, between 10:30 and midnight. Sometimes he'd be there for 20 minutes, sometimes almost an hour. I watched the footage for multiple nights and my panic turned into complete confusion. Frank wasn't doing anything creepy or criminal. He was gardening, watering the plants, pulling weeds, deadheading the roses, staking up the tomato plants, trimming back overgrown bushes. I went back through 6 months of footage from the camera's previous owner had apparently left in the garage that I'd found. Same thing. Frank, every single night, quietly maintaining my entire yard. I didn't know what to do with this information. Part of me felt violated that someone was coming into my yard without permission, but another part of me was just deeply confused about why. I decided to just ask him directly. Caught him the next evening when he was getting his mail. Told him I'd installed security cameras and had seen him in my backyard. His face went completely white. He started apologizing immediately, said he'd stop, said he knew it was wrong.
I told him I wasn't mad, but I needed to understand why. He looked embarrassed, stared at his feet for a long moment, then he told me. The previous owners were named Margaret and Tom. Margaret was Frank's wife's best friend for over 40 years. They'd moved in next door 30 years ago. Frank's wife Helen died 5 years ago from cancer. Margaret and Tom took care of Frank after Helen passed, brought him meals, kept him company. Margaret loved gardening, and Helen had loved it too. They'd worked on their gardens together for decades, spent hours out there talking and planting and planning. Margaret got diagnosed with Alzheimer's 3 years ago. It progressed fast. Tom couldn't take care of her at home anymore, and they moved to a memory care facility about a year ago. Had to sell the house. Frank said he knew it was crazy, but he couldn't stand watching Helen and Margaret's garden die. All those plants they'd chosen together, planted together, nurtured for years. He said it felt like losing them both all over again, so he just kept taking care of it. Climbed through a gap in the fence every night and maintained everything exactly how they would have wanted. He said he knew when I moved in that he should stop, that it was my property now and he had no right, but he couldn't bring himself to let it all die. He apologized again, said he'd never come back, started to walk away. I told him to wait, told him the garden was beautiful, and I had no idea how to take care of any of it. Asked if he wanted to just keep doing what he was doing, but maybe through the front gate instead of sneaking through the fence. Maybe during daylight hours. Maybe I could help sometimes on my days off and he could teach me what Helen and Margaret knew. He cried, actually stood there on the sidewalk and cried, said he'd like that very much. Frank came over yesterday afternoon, spent 2 hours showing me how to properly prune the roses, explaining which vegetables were ready to harvest. Told me stories about Helen and Margaret, about the day they planted the rose bushes, about the summer they grew 40 pounds of tomatoes. I'm working on clearing out my spare bedroom. Frank's going to help me turn it into a proper guest room. He mentioned that Margaret's daughter lives across the country and never gets to visit her mom. Maybe she'd like to stay here sometimes when she comes to town to see the garden her mother loved.